Thanks, everyone. Welcome. This is November. Only one more month to go in the year. Isn't that amazing? We've been doing this for a year and more now. And today we wanted to address this issue, which we hear so many people talking about, and we've experienced it ourselves over the years, is how the hell do I get people on board this collaboration stuff? How do I win the boss over? How do I convince people? Yeah, how do we convince people that this collaboration thing is worth doing on this project or on this program? So many people, it seems, have a level of frustration about that for whatever reason. Given permission, they just can't get the buy-in, can't get the budget. And one of the things we always hear, of course, is that we should be collaborating now, but we only sort of start to go out to people late in the game when it's too late. We'd love to get permission to do it earlier. So these are the sorts of things we want to address. As always, we'll introduce a bit of framework and really want to leave you with some practical things that you can actually walk out and start doing right away. So that's my hope, at least. So I'm going to share my screen. Got a few slides as usual. Gavin's just joining us. And we'll just talk that through quickly. So give me a sec. We're just working on that now. All right. So I'll just put that over here and put that onto. Yep, there we go. Oops. Oops. Sorry, jumping ahead there. So,
can't see it yet, Stuart.
You can't see my slides? I'm sharing.
Oh, yeah. Everybody got it? So you're not on slideshow.
Oh, okay. Swap screens. So you'd think I'd know how to do this by now, wouldn't you? Just two screens is always confusing.
There you go. That's it.
That's better. Okay. Very, very good. So how to win over? How to win over the boss? How to win over the team? How to make this case? So let's just quickly move ahead here. Some of the things we see, and I'm sure there are others, the boss says, look, we can get these results without having to do anything different. It's working okay. We're getting what we need to get. It might only be a minimum, but we don't need to do anything different because what we're doing is giving us what we need. So that might be one reason for a bit of resistance across the system amongst the stakeholders. The other thing we often see, and we want to really address this today in some detail, is this stuff is important. We should be collaborating or engaging authentically with our stakeholders, and that's why we do it, and we're pretty good at it, aren't we? So that sort of delusion, if I was to be cheeky, that what we are doing constitutes collaboration. In a way, we don't know what we don't know. So we think that what we are doing, if we call it collaboration, it feels a bit like collaboration, therefore we're already doing it. So why are you saying we need to do something different? There's some of the things we see. I wonder, what do you see? Is that any of those resonate, or what else is going on that causes some of the pain around this that you see in your organisation? Anyone want to dive in on that?
Okay, it's Catherine. I often have people say we don't have time, or it's going to unearth more problems. So we don't want to unearth more problems.
Yeah, okay, it's a risky. You never quite know what you're going to open up if you start talking to people. Good, thanks, Catherine. Anything else?
The time commitment is definitely one for us as well. This is the other Catherine.
Yeah.
So processes are the deadline's too short. We don't have time to engage. And so it then becomes a decide, announce, defend instead.
With all the consequences of that, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Good, thanks, Catherine's. Anything else? Anyone who isn't called Catherine?
I was just going to say exactly the same thing that both Catherines had said, actually. So it always comes down to that time we don't have time, and it turns out actually, if you do it, you end up saving even more time.
It's got to sort of have the experience, don't you, Michelle? Which I think is the challenge. If you haven't had the experience, you can't see that it'll take less time.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think it does come down to how many times you've actually been through this yourself, and I think you can actually then remove the emotion out of it when you have these conversations with the resistors. I think it's easier to then explain to them, but if we do, and then we do this, and then we do that, it's a win-win situation, because you actually end up gaining so much more in ambassadors for your initiative or your new process or whatever it is you're wanting to collaborate with. So yeah,
that's good. Thanks, Michelle. That's interesting. So we will certainly draw on that conversation a little in a little bit.
I think the other thing that I saw, Stuart, just yesterday when we had our review of the other webinar with the group, was this one about it's easier not to change and just get a result, particularly in a highly charged political environment. The boss needs the announceables. We've got to get a result. So it's actually better to get a result. It's a result. Won't be the best, but at least I've got somewhere. So that's one of the arguments to stay with the status quo rather than trying something a bit different.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so all of that, I think, amounts to what we might cheekily call the collaboration fairy tale. And I think this is sort of one of the myths I want to bust, that what we are doing is collaboration. I think we do conspire in telling ourselves a comfortable story. So what do we mean by that? So John and I have been chewing on this just for the last few weeks, and it's a bit surprising how this has emerged from that conversation. So some examples quickly. So the fairy tale is, well, we get that facilitator in every quarter. We get in the room together. We have that conversation. We do a workshop. We get sticky notes in. Of course, we're collaborating, aren't we? That's what collaboration is. And everyone nods and smiles. But I think in reality, often, the focus on the event, we have to get in the room once in a while, every month or whatever. The focus on the event gives us permission to just be business as usual when we're not in that room together. So the fairy tale is we're collaborating. The reality is, well, we get in the room from time to time.
A good example, Stuart, just working with a client and lots of meetings, and all very nice in the meetings, particularly when I'm sitting in. And as it turns out, what bubbles up is, Jesus, we walk out of the meeting and we're bloody quite dysfunctional. And we're now hearing more and more stories about the dysfunction that exists outside the events. Everybody's been on their best behaviour. We think we're collaborating, but it's just as bad as it's always been, which is nothing changes.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing changes because we don't have the conversations that really matter. This is one I see often, particularly in those circumstances, although I think you're seeing it, John, internally, but I see it often where an organisation is working with external stakeholders, with community. They keep asking for more data, more facts, more figures, prove your point. And we keep responding. So that's what collaboration is, isn't it? They ask us for the data. We scratch around and we give them everything they ask for. So that's collaboration, isn't it? But of course, what's really going on often is it's really a lack of trust. We don't quite believe your data or your conclusions, or we think you're hiding something. We're not hiding something. We want to convince you that we're right. So we keep giving you more and more data, and we get stuck in a data loop. The number of times I've seen clients wasting all their time, really frustrated at how much time it takes for these information requests to be dealt with. And in the end, they don't really add value to anyone. They're really evidence that our collaboration is a bit of a fairy tale.
So this client I've got, Stuart, constant meetings where they keep reporting more, another request for another graph, another something that shows us this or that. And the whole underlying issue, as we now realise, it's all about trust. I mean, nobody trusts each other. Therefore, we keep asking for more stuff. Now they're starting to address the issue of why is it that we don't trust each other? And I suspect that we will see some changes then.
Yeah. So just moving forward, what we can do and what we need to do to make the case is to challenge some of those fairy tales, highlight the risks that come with them, as you know, you've already started to allude to the decide, announce, defend, and perhaps demonstrate the gains. So this is part of what we want to talk about today. So what would that look like? Well, if we want to change the narrative, change that fairy tale, in this case, we might start to say, you know what, collaboration is about actually working together all the time. It's not just about that quarterly workshop or getting a facilitator in to make us collaborate. It's actually, we have to work together today, tomorrow, next week. That's what it looks like. And what we will get if we do that genuinely, we actually will get change slowly, but our relationship will look different. So that's the narrative, you know, that's the busting that myth of the fairy tale. The other one, just quickly, would be, you know, we focus on the data, but probably where we really need to focus is on the relationships. We're not doing that, so we're not really collaborating. So what I would like to be doing is something different. Take some time to talk about the extent that trust, power, dynamics, those sorts of things. And with that, we will get more trust, less suspicion, more productive conversations, less drilling down into the data, which is never the issue. It's a proxy for we don't trust you. So
interesting, Stuart, this morning's meeting with the client, they had a slightly different narrative. They actually spent some time talking about the culture shift that they saw they needed. And it was interesting because at the end of the meeting, they said this was a different meeting. It was more productive. So it just reflected exactly what you're talking about by trying to change that narrative from the fairy tale of more data to, okay, and they showed the data, but they started to ask some different questions. They paid a little more attention to how they were working around the data, not just the data.
So I think that's kind of our big picture hypothesis and way forward in that context. And we'll send you a tool that spells this out a little more clearly, and you may actually be able to use that guide to put it on the table and surface some of this stuff. Well, you say we're collaborating, but in fact, you know, it might look different. So that's part of the argument, and we'll give you that tool after this event. But what I really wanted to do more practically, I think we'll move past that, is I want to focus on the reframe from we can't do this around here when we haven't got the permission, they're not giving us the time, you know, we can't, to, you know what, we can. And I think this is something that's really become clear to us over the you know, the time we've been doing this, is you can put on your collaborative lenses, your goggles, and you can start collaborating from day one. You really don't need permission. And we thought we'd talk through three examples of that, and, you know, happy for your stories as well. So just do stuff. And this is, I guess, about downscaling what we are trying to do here with our collaboration. If I think about redesign, collaboration means I've got to redesign my project plan, you know, go to my stakeholders earlier, might take more time, all that stuff. They're barriers that we've talked about, and that's going to make it challenging. If I can reframe that, it's what can I do today that's bringing that thinking in? What am I going to try today that I don't need permission for? The small steps. How can I see this next project collaboratively? So my next conversation with my client, how can I ask them instead of tell them? How can I find out what they need for our meeting tomorrow before I write the agenda? You know, all this stuff is really simple, but it actually gives me permission. I can give myself permission to just do stuff. Would you add anything on that, John, the just do?
Well, it's combined with the use and, Stuart. So just from this morning, let me give you an example this morning. So we had the data meeting. You know, this was one group reporting to the other, the groups that don't trust each other. And it was, so traditionally it was the boss would get in there and say, what are you doing wrong? This is what I think you're doing wrong. No, we didn't. Here's the data to defend. What they tried today, they didn't and. They provided the data, but they also well, they went strategic, which is what they normally do. What's this mean at the big picture? But they also got into some detail, and they hadn't done the detail before. So they didn't end. They did the strategic stuff that everybody was expecting, but they also got into some of the nitty-gritty and just took a little bit of time to get into a couple of specifics. And it was interesting because it was using an and, yeah, okay, we do what we normally do, but we try something else. And it was just doing stuff. So it was trying something a bit different. And as I said, it was quite a different conversation that the group had. And it wasn't huge change. I mean, it was all the same players there. They got through the same info. You know, they met their needs, but they did some different stuff, and they tried something different. And I think we're pleasantly surprised how effective it was in shifting the narrative, if you like, from the fantasy of we've had a meeting and we've shared data there for everything's okay, to okay, that was a more productive and useful conversation. And there was an indication I trust you a little more. I mean, still a bit of work to do there, but that was my, I guess, latest experience about doing stuff and taking an and approach rather than, oh, we can focus on strategic or we can focus on detail. Well, no, let's do both. And I think they said, oh, it worked. Now, the downside was that the boss who normally manages this meeting wasn't there. There was a substitute in. So, but it was interesting that they actually then raised the fact that why is it that we act differently when the boss is here? And so they're actually going to try some stuff next time with the boss just by checking the expectations of that person against the expectations of others in the room. So they're already identified something else to try next time to manage an issue that they have now been able to surface, rather than we have the meeting and everything's okay. It's like sometimes it's dysfunctional and we need to do something different.
Yeah, that's good. So when I think of using the and, I think the thing that stands out for me is, so I've heard already today that time frames, when we might unearth more problems, but this thing about if we start collaborating, we're going to miss our deadlines, and that's the critical thing. We might miss our milestones. What I need is this result by this time. And I think this is how I'm thinking of the and, is say, okay, we will commit to that. We will run this project, you know, to that milestone, and we'll get what we need. In other words, you're not challenging that. We're not making a case. We're not trying to convince anyone that we have to put down what's important to us. We're actually saying you can hold on to that, hold on to what's important to us as leaders, as an organization, as a business, as a team, and we're going to try something different. And that's the magic of this. I think it's putting down the belief that if I'm to collaborate on this, we have to rewrite the whole script. And of course, it's really hard to convince anyone about that. We don't have to rewrite the script. We say the script is fine, and we're going to do this. So we'll use the processes we typically use. We'll engage only when we engage. But tomorrow, you know, I'm going to be thinking like a collaborator, and I'm going to try something a little different to the extent I can. So it's sort of, in a way, it's a subversive approach to collaboration. You don't need the permission. It's not seeking permission. It's saying, absolutely, those constraints exist, and I'm going to do something different.
So it's letting people hold on to the things that they value. So not saying you've got to give something up. So it's hold on to it, and so it just adds on to what really matters to you. And if getting the announcement for the boss is important, absolutely hold on to it strongly, deliver that. And so you're looking for the constant and. I think that leads into this sort of dial it up and down. We sort of sometimes draw it as a bit of a collaborative dial from 0 to 10. You know, you think you might say full collaboration, whatever that means, and no collaboration, whatever that means. And oftentimes it's seen that when you collaborate, it's all or nothing. And we're saying, no, I had a client and the guy said, John, I just want to talk to you about how I'm approaching the work. We're really constrained. We have all sorts of rules in the organisation. We're the decision maker, a whole lot of stuff we can't change. And so he dialed it up just a little bit by listening more and when he went to the meetings that were constrained by all the rules and the RMA and everything. And he said, made a huge difference, even though I was able to dial it up. And as I got more progress, I was able to dial it up a bit more to the level that was appropriate. And he probably never got past 2 or 3 or 4, but very satisfied, much better outcomes for the group, and more willing, I guess, to do things like that in the future. So it almost gives, as you said, Michelle, that experience of something a bit different, but in a fairly safe way. You know, you were comfortable, more comfortable, bit of uncertainty, but not too much. So dial it up to whatever the environment will bear.
Yeah, yeah. And the reframe around that part of it is, if we think our task here in this conversation, this context, is to convince them that the approach we would typically use isn't good and we have to do something that looks different and scary, it's a really big ask for ourselves, puts us under pressure, and it's probably going to mean we get the no, that's too hard response. But the reframe is really just not expecting anyone to change that. Look, I had a fabulous point in my head then, but it's just slipped out. So it'll come back to me. Damn. So the dialing up and down. Anyway, so there we are on that. I'll definitely come back to that. What's your experience, folks? Or what I'm interested in your reaction to those points. Can you imagine yourselves stepping into that? Can you do the and? Are you doing the and? How does that feel as a way to step into a more collaborative space?
How are you for reframing the conversation, the narrative?
And I know what I was going to say now. It's the rational task of convincing them is a really hard task, and I think it's not what we need to be doing here. Rather, as we've already said, we need to be showing people, giving ourselves and our business a slightly different experience to the extent we can. So just try stuff, show it, reveal it, talk about it, build that experience over time, rather than say, here's the way we need to do it and it looks different.
Because you can't convince them. All you can do is provide them an opportunity to convince themselves, if you like, that there's a different path. Invite them in to some alternatives and see what happens.
So, folks, any feedback, any thoughts or anything
reaction
to add to that? Yeah.
Yes, I think it's what you're saying in those ideas is a really softly approach that I think is absolutely so valuable, because as you were just saying, if you try and convince someone, you actually just strengthen their resolve, and they start building walls to defend against it. Whereas this is like a very gentle sort of approach that I think is the way in. Absolutely. So it's fantastic.
Well, what have we got to lose? It's a way in, isn't it? And it's something that is always within our power to do today, tomorrow. We actually have some control over this. We are not powerless, waiting for someone, the universe, to let us work differently. We can actually just do it to the extent we can. Yeah.
One recent example that I've got is there was a political deadline for a strategy to be ready. So, okay, phase one was to get to that point and achieve what we could, highlighting along the way the strength of, if we had more time or if we had these other opportunities, that we'd be able to create more buy-in, more ownership, and across government agencies in this case. And so it just worked within that context a bit, like you say, just doing it. So with the actual people on the ground talking about it as a two-phase thing, but still we could meet the political imperative along the way. As it turned out, the political imperative went away. Good old COVID trumped it. So it in this case meant that I've had the opportunity to kind of do a full scope of the project. That was luck of the draw. That's not going to always happen. But I think as far as building credibility with the stakeholders, them seeing a more fulsome and a well-considered project, even though there was always this deadline, this milestone that we knew that we were going to get to, and that it would only be part of the journey, by contexting it in a bigger piece, that helped buy-in, I think.
Yeah, great, Brett, thanks. Yeah, good. What else, folks? Any other experience of that, or any questions about this? Anything you're not sure of? One thing I might...
So I guess...
Yep, go on.
I was just going to say one thing, which it does sound like having a very sort of patient... there's not a lot of room in this approach for haste, in that if you're an impatient person who is getting frustrated, it's good to be patient and not be too frustrated. Because this could take some time, baby steps.
Well, yeah, I think the point about just do stuff, I think there are things to do tomorrow, today. So I think there's certain momentum. I know that momentum's important. So I think the point about making sure you try some stuff, do something, I think is a key, because I think the people looking on saying, I'll get frustrated if we do nothing, it'll take longer. So it'll reinforce that. So I think encourage people to step in, and that's where the end comes in, because do what you're going to do, but just do something else as well. But I certainly agree that I think patience doesn't always work when there's deliverables and demands and we've got to get on and the relationship's deteriorating, we can't wait. So don't wait, but I think it's less about the not wait, it's more about what you do with when you're not waiting.
Yeah, so, and that comes back to the dial it down, make it small things that I can do today, not big things that I've got to wait for the organisation to catch up on, which it may never do. So don't wait, just do. And so hopefully, as John just says, that actually gives the action-oriented people something that they can do.
Maybe we change number one, Stuart, to don't wait, just do stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point, though. I mean, people do get frustrated, and you've highlighted the one about time commitment, short deadlines, takes more time. You don't want to reinforce that. I guess you want to encourage that you can get outcomes on this, because obviously that's the demand.
So that's 1 o'clock. I know people have to go, but we'll be here and happy to keep talking. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Hi, Stuart. It's Catherine Baker. I just had a question. I've been in a few organisations where that concept of freedom to do and talk to people and try and take some initiative yourself in the collaboration space is taken away from you because you're told you can't talk to certain people. Your manager might be a micromanager or just a very uncollaborative person. And both my husband and I have been in situations where we've tried to organise meetings and collaborative approaches to things, but basically being told we can't. Do you have any suggestions in that space?
Yeah, get a different job.
Yep.
Get a different boss.
Yeah.
Dialing it down is the thing that's popped into my head just at the minute, Catherine. So if meetings are too scary for the organisation and you're not allowed, then that's, you've got to dial it down. So what's a notch down from the meeting? Is it just checking in on agendas? I don't know. What space is there, even in my constrained world? If I put on my collaborative goggles, what do I see? And it might be more.
It might be just gather data. It might be, okay, I can't have a meeting, but can I just contact those people to gather a bit of information that might help us with our project? It's sort of finding a way that you can still do the connections, but without the risk that is perceived of losing control or whatever.
Thank you.
Catherine, if I could suggest, it's just, honestly, it's all about the conversations. I let the conversations take the momentum of the idea, the seed, and it's that planting of the idea and the planting of the innovation and the planting of the collaboration. And there's far more people out there that are willing to do it than are not, because we've got more of an environment that people actually know what collaboration is and they're hungry for it. And before you know it, because I've had that experience where people go, no, you don't go do that. You can't go talk to them. I just go and have a chat. Just go, well, what do you think? And what do you think? And then before you know it, everybody's knocking back on your boss's door going, hey, I think we should. You know, it's not deceptive, but it's just about having those conversations, and it's the gathering of the clan.
Peer pressure. Yes.
Yeah, good.
Well, I wouldn't say peer pressure. I'd just say a gathering of like-minded souls.
Michelle,
Nice.
you're a bit of a guerrilla gardener going around planting those seeds throughout the organisation. Great.
I do what I can.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else, folks? Any other observations? Any other questions about your reality, making this work? Okay. Might just end the show and stop sharing my screen so I can see your fabulous faces. So that's about all we needed to say, but I'm happy to keep the conversation going. If anyone wants to jump in, happy to talk.
Yeah, and also we'll send you the fairy tale. You may well find that's just a tool, something that you can use to help your thinking, or even use as a tool with the people you're talking to. Just to, what are we seeing here, and what are the implications? So being able to surface what might be going on can sometimes help. So you might find that useful.
Good.